Hello, Brovs. We're back with even another book, The Making of a Vampire. Paracelsus, Rabbi Loew, Saint Germain, Dracula by Alexander Şendrea, a native of Transylvania. It's published in 1982, American Institute for Writing Research. It's a rather scarce book, and I was looking for Halloween-esque books to read on here since it's October. And since I'm going to this sale tomorrow, obviously it's not 2019, but that's when I purchased this. I'm going to the sale tomorrow. It just happens to work out right. Originally, they have a special book room where you can buy rarer books. This one's rather scarce. I don't know if it's worth that much because nobody's probably looking for it, but originally they wanted $15, but then I said no to that. The next year, or the next sale, or next year, it was at $5. And then finally, it made its way out to the general population of books. And since it has no barcode, none of the resellers purchased it. But since I collect good books, I did. Obviously, Rabbi Loew is of interest since I just read a book about the Golem, and Rabbi Loew figured prominently in the Golem myth. All right, what else do we need to know here? Facts, Fiction, Legends by Alexander Şendrea. What do we need to see here? Young Witch, Accepting the Demon's Fire, drawings by Hans Boldung, 1515. Quite an interesting caricature here of a kimono dragon probing the witch while two children watch on. Maybe they're cherubs, I don't know. Striking cover, to say the least. Alexander Şendrea, a native of Transylvania, is a recent immigrant to this country, and his English is not literary. The publisher did not modify his style in order to preserve its originality. Well, that's great to know, honestly. Old Myths and New Legends. It's a rather long chapter, so let's get into it. I'll read about 20 minutes of it, and then that's that. Old Myths and New Legends. The picturesque Borgo Pass on some maps leads the traveler through old forests and quiet alpine meadows from Transylvania, through Moldova, two small provinces of a small country called Romania. Not far from Borgo Pass, deep in the dark green of the Carpathian Mountains, there was a castle of sinister fame, a vast, ruined castle from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky. So went the legend, but the reality was even gloomier. Many strange events occurred in that castle a long time ago, and many curses were called down upon it by the pious peasants who lived in those remote parts. 2,000 years ago, when the Romanians were the only inhabitants of the country, the life there was a patriarchal one, rich and flourishing, and rewarding in all ways, much similar to the fabulous golden age of the history. Soon other people, Hungarians, Secklers, Saxons, and Jews, were attracted to the area because of its prosperity, physical beauty, and the kindness of the natives. They all were simple, hard-working countrymen, gentle and devoted to their differing vocations and beliefs. For many centuries, they lived together or in separate villages and shared mutual respect, but they could not abide the evil that came lately from the castle. Time and again, they cursed the castle and its weird dwellers and cast spells over them in accordance with the old customs. They even placed rabbit paws around the castle in order to ward off the demons, but the evil was stronger than magic and did not depart. Eventually, when the omens were favorable, simple people knew the omens. The peasants gathered together in revolt and destroyed the castle completely. They burnt the furniture, brought down the walls, and used the stones to pave roads. Over the years, the rain and snow filled up the empty caves that remained after the demolition until no traces of the castle could be seen anymore. This happened a long time ago, but the legend is still alive, and even today the traveler may hear it told here and there. I heard it first in an inn in Bistrita, a town near Bargao Pass. Wise old women who cannot sleep spend part of the night in that inn and talk to the people while drinking a glass or two of tuica, the plum brandy of the country. I learned a lot from them, mainly when I offered another glass of tuica, or is it tuica? Little by little, I traveled across half of Transylvania in the pursuit of my research and wrote down in my notebook several legends and myths. I do not refer here to the legends, which are common knowledge and are already published in volumes and commented upon by experts and exegetes. I refer to certain old stories of limited circulation, which are generally little known. It is my belief that these old stories, even if of doubtful truth, could make a significant contribution to the subject matter of my discourse. Many readers appreciate them more than the common legends. These little-known stories are like gossips that spread before or after the publication of the official news in newspapers, and the researcher can find in them details and solutions that are often missing from the common legends. Some of these little old stories had to do with Count Dracula, the vampire, who allegedly lived for a time in the Bargao castle. Some others had to do with Paracelsus, the alchemist, who came to Transylvania in search of a special kind of blood which was necessary for his homunculus, i.e., his artificial human being. Another little-known legend concerned the fabulous Count of Saint Germain, who, under the name of a local ruler, Prince Rakosizi, stopped for a while in Transylvania. Several times I listened with interest to the story of the wise Rabbi Loew of Prague, Bohemia, in today Czechoslovakia, who made a human figure from river mud and brought it to life through black magic. The name of the creature was Gollum. Other legends dealt with gnomes, misspelled, sylphs, and newts, the guardians of hidden places. All those little-known legends had one thing in common. At one point or another, they were relating to an artificial or magical being created not by God, but by man, and whose name was sometimes the vampire, some other times the golem, homunculus, or Dracula. Being a native of the country and speaking fluently her vernaculars, it was not difficult for me to meet the country women who knew such stories, to offer them tuica, and ask questions. I filled several notebooks with all kind of legends and myths, some concerning Count Dracula himself and other relating to dreadful specters, witches, sorcerers, and magicians. I went to libraries to check these stories for accuracy. I couldn't find written reports on all the strange events connected with my topic, but I had the opportunity to verify some important historical facts related to them. For instance, I understood that in his real life, Dracula was not a count, but a prince, and his name was Vlad II Dracula the Impaler, ruler of Wallachia, another small Romanian province, sometime during the second half of the 15th century. Then I found the report that Paracelsus, the famed alchemist, arrived in Transylvania half a century after Prince Vlad's death. An old and wise thaumaturge of Bratislava, which is the capital of Slovakia, a bordering country north of Transylvania, told me the story of Paracelsus's encounter with an evil spirit, a vampire, which was much similar, if not the same, with the demon later called Count Dracula. The creation of the golem by wise Rabbi Loew was reported in several legends of the 15th century. It's a bizarre way of... No, actually, it's the 17th century. One of which alluded to the same evil spirit, the vampire. I was amazed to hear that the famous Count of Saint Germain, who, according to some myths, was none other than the wandering or eternal Jew, crossed paths with the same demon sometime during the 18th century in Alba Iulia, then capital of Transylvania. Finally, I was consternated to learn that the same spirit or demon who started wandering in the 15th century after the death of Prince Vlad II Dracula, or is it Vlad II Dracula? And then met with Paracelsus, Rabbi Loew, and the Count of Saint Germain, reappeared in Transylvania in the 19th century as the voracious Count Dracula, the vampire. How was it possible? I suspiciously asked my friend, the thaumaturge of Bratislava. It was possible, he answered, because of a strange event which, according to a hearsay, occurred during Prince Dracula's funeral, an event which laid low Prince Dracula and rose up Dracula the vampire. He then told me what the event was. At the time, there was such a mixture of reality and legends in my notebook that I found it difficult to further my investigation. I wanted to draw up a record in which all the events had to be listed chronologically, but could not decide anymore in what order to list the events. I recurred to my friend, the thaumaturge of Bratislava, who knew all about magicians and masters of demons, their times and deeds, meetings and disputes, appearances and disappearances. He lived in the old city on Ulika Michalska, in an old house filled with books, in Cunabula and manuscripts, and had a register of all those events and stories. Moreover, he was an expert in the art of differentiating the real from the unreal. He advised me how to treat the mixture of my information, how to recognize what was figurative language in those legends, and how to distinguish mental images from the products of imagination. I have followed his methods since then, and have drawn up this account, which is a true narration, a chronicle if we prefer this term, of all facts real and legendary connected with Dracula, the vampire, and his adventures. I put all the facts together in such a manner that the reader would easily discern what is history and what is myth. I hope the reader will agree with my method. It is not difficult to protest today that Count Dracula the vampire is a legend. And the supporters of this stance might be right to some extent. In the 500 years that have flown away since the real Dracula's death, reality and imagination have interwoven to the fullest. Some real events that actually happened 500 years ago might seem so strange today that the modern reader can hardly believe they occurred. He prefers, therefore, to call them fiction. On the other hand, and in spite of the modern reader's disbelief, some events related by legends and myths were proven to have really happened. However, the American opinion on Dracula is split even today. Even though the subject has been thoroughly researched, a group of scholars believe he really existed. Among them, Professor Radu Florescu of Boston College is well known for his 3 volumes about Dracula. In fact, Florescu is a descendant of the old princely family which gave Wallachia, the real Prince Vlad II Dracula, and can be, therefore, considered an authoritative voice. Some other scholars flatly reject any connection between the legendary Dracula and the real one. Among them was the late Professor Vasily Barsan of Mankato University, who published strong, even offensive, denials of certain hints conveyed by Florescu. The latter felt insulted and filed a suit against his critic, claiming $1 million in damages. Eventually, the two scholars were reconciled and their dispute was settled. Such fiery, diverse opinions were possible. First, because nobody cared to investigate Dracula's story in its fullest, that is, in the monster's relation to other influential masters of demons who were extant in Transylvania over the centuries and were instrumental in the creation of the vampire's legend. Second, because a borderline between the real and the fantastic in Dracula's story cannot be always discerned. Anything in Dracula can be real and bizarre at the same time. I will begin this discourse with the real. I should stress again that in real life, Dracula was not a count, which in feudalism was a rank between a baron and a marquis, but a prince, a feudal nobleman as high as a duke, next in power to a king. Vlad II Dracula was the ruling prince of Wallachia, the southern province of what is today Romania. His crown had 9 spikes, like that of a duke, whereas a count's crown had only 5 and a baron's 3. Let's look at this map. The area in Eastern Europe haunted by Dracula, the vampire. Well, damn, he had a large range. Near the Black Sea, between the Adriatic, Turkey, Transylvania, Slovakia, Moldova, Bohemia. There's Prague up there. That's going to be central in there, buddy. Transylvania. All right. Vlad was born in Sighisoara, which is in Transylvania, and reigned 3 times in Wallachia. In 1476, he was killed in fight by a rival. His cognomen, the Impaler, was given to him because the terrible tool of death he used to punish offenders. As soon as his cops apprehended swindlers, muggers, killers, grafters, thieves, traitors, adulterers, homosexuals, abolitionists, atheists, blasphemers, plotters, and the like, Vlad II ordered one single punishment, the sharp stake. This special punitive act had a technical name, to impale. It was a torture that killed little by little with horrible pains. The offender was first lifted to the top of the stake, his behind fixed against the sharp point, and was pulled down so as to be thoroughly pierced by the stake. The idea operation figure 5 was achieved when the stake went through the whole body. See if I can find figure 5. There's figure 12. Oh, let's find figure 5. There's figure 6. We're close. There it is. Well, that's painful. Through the anus and out the mouth. A sketch of a no-fault implement. The stake goes all the way through the body from the hole of the ass to the hole of the mouth. The victim cannot yell because his vocal organs are broken. He is free, however, to writhe until is caught in the jaws of death. He is caught, I suppose they meant. All right, well, that's interesting. The idea operation was achieved when the stake went through the whole body from rectum to neck and came out through the mouth, thus stifling the convict's groan. Like other professional executioners and hangmen, Vlad's executioners didn't like groans, these being too disturbing of their spiritual peace. They therefore strove to do a no-fault job and have the stake come out through the victim's mouth. However, time and again they were unable to perform the impaling without mistake, mainly when the convict struggled too much and thrashed about. Therefore, the executions were many times accompanied by ugly, horrid yells of atrocious pain. This dreadful punishment was applied by Vlad not only to local criminals, such as those enumerated above, but to the country's enemies as well, and his fame as a merciless avenger of such offenses spread all over Europe. In Austria, his admirers commissioned 2 portraits of him, which can be seen even today. One is in a castle belonging to von Stepberg family near Salzburg, figure 2. Do we really need to look at that? The second is an oil portrait preserved in Ambras Castle near Innsbruck, figure 3. There's Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia, or is it Wallachia? Let's find 3. Oh, yes, that's so much different. Prince of Wallachia. I'll say Wallachia. It sounds like warlock. In France, Vlad had a brilliant challenger in his contemporary King Louis XI, who promulgated 2 dreadful punishments at almost the same time. One for traitors hung in nails. They were first flayed alive, then castrated, then disemboweled, and finally quartered. The second for homosexuals. They were killed slowly by immersion in boiling oil. Other similar penalties were enforced against all kinds of offenders. As a result, the life in France under Louis XI was pretty good for honest people. When King Richard III of England, the one who offered in Shakespeare his kingdom for a horse at Bosworth in 1485, heard how good the life was in France under Louis XI, but being too busy with his intrigues and not having the time to invent similar sophisticated punishments, British style, on English soil, he resolved to kill his opponents as soon as possible, having no doubt that he, Richard III, was the only righteous. He exceeded all his emulators by the rapidity of his executions. So he murdered Clarence, killed Hastings, Rivers, and Grey, liquidated the princes he kept in the Tower, executed Buckingham, all in a couple of months. At the other end of Europe and East, Prince Vlad's fame spread so far and wide that all prospective criminals, as well as all foes who plotted from abroad to invade Wallachia, were so concerned with the possibility of being caught and impaled that they thought twice before doing wrong, and usually ended up by abandoning their infamous projects. As a consequence, the social life in Wallachia was peaceful and quiet for honest people. There was little or no interference in domestic affairs from the wise experts of abroad. There were no crimes, no social decay. Homosexuals did not dare to get out of their closets. Abortions were reduced to the necessary minimum. Atheists and blasphemers disappeared from the area. Thieves, muggers, and murderers evaporated. Since no champion of freedom was allowed to tell the women what their rights were, the women were content with their husbands and children and didn't want to be liberated. It was absolutely safe to go out onto the streets at any time during the night. If somebody forgot his purse on a bench and came back next day in search of it, he usually found it in the same place, untouched. The honesty and quality of the social and political mores imposed by Vlad bore witness that the Impaler was not a neurotic, red in tooth and claw as depicted by his detractors, but a drastic ruler, a concerned patriot, and a keen enforcer of the law. His main purpose was to observe the public order. How better the life might be in many countries if they had a Vlad the Impaler rule them. I agree. Bring back Vlad. All right, I'm going to stop there. Goodbye, bruv. Good boy. Till next time. Good boy.